Hello, everybody, and welcome to this short video that covers 4 sections of House Bill 24-1047, Veterinary Technician Scope of Practice. My name is Diane Matt, and I'm the CEO of the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association. My colleague, Erin Henninger, is here too. Erin.
I'm Erin Henninger, and I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Association of Certified Veterinary Technicians, better known as CACVT. Both of our organizations were deeply involved in the development of the Veterinary Technician Scope of Practice bill. The bill requires the state board to adopt rules about the delegation and supervision requirements of the bill by September 1st, 2025, which is quickly approaching.
Just around the corner.
CACVT and CVMA created this video for the State Board of Veterinary Medicine to provide information and insight into the statute that underpins the regulations now being written. Diane will cover the first 11 slides that provide the big picture of the bill, and I will walk you through sections on delegations and supervision. Diane, you're up.
Okay. Let's start by talking about the purpose of this briefing. It's intended to help the State Board of Veterinary Medicine understand the legislative intent of House Bill 24-1047, which is to authorize and encourage better delegation and supervision in Colorado. We'll touch on the bill's core provisions. We'll go over delegation structure, supervision levels, task definitions, and the role of veterinary technician specialists. Our objective is to help the board understand the statute in order to adopt rules that are consistent with the law. Ultimately, HB 24-1047 supports a team-based care model that preserves public and animal safety while improving practice efficiency and service delivery across Colorado. The final bullet on this page is a link to the statute itself in case you're interested in seeing what the legislature actually passed. Here are the main points of House Bill 24-1047. First, it establishes a clear statutory foundation for veterinary delegation. It provides structure and clarity for task distribution within veterinary teams, while it also reinforces the veterinarian's clinical authority. Second, it empowers veterinarians to delegate judiciously and flexibly. The statute encourages and authorizes high-quality, efficient delegation at the veterinarian's discretion. In this way, it balances operational flexibility with professional responsibility. Something important to remember as we continue in this briefing is that competency-based delegation is required. Veterinarians must assess the training, experience, and capability of each individual before delegating a task, ensuring safety and upholding standards of care. Those accepting delegation are responsible for declining delegation if the task is outside their scope of competence. The statute also identifies a defined list of delegable tasks, plus some open delegation authority. So the statute enumerates specific tasks that are eligible for delegation, and it also permits delegation beyond that list, providing statutory and regulatory safeguards are met. This table is intended to be a cross-reference between statute and rule. So on the left column of the table are shown the 14 sections of House Bill 24-1047. For this briefing, we're going to cover the first 4 sections of the bill and section 12, and those are shown here in tan. The right-hand column lists each section of the draft rule matched up with its corresponding section of the statute. We feel that if there are questions about a rule, we hope it will help the board find the corresponding statute about the rule. So let's begin by looking at sections 1 through 3 of the bill. These are the framing and the context in the legislative declaration, then definitions and exceptions. And then Erin will cover sections 4 and 12. So let's dig in. Whenever there's a question about how to apply a section of the law or what the legislature meant or intended, the declaration offers guiding principles. So the legislative declaration in 24-1047 explains why the legislature passed this bill. It establishes the policy goals that the rest of the bill is designed to achieve. So what does it communicate to the board? It communicates that the legislature recognizes veterinary medicine as a team-based profession. It intends to ensure that delegation is done safely, effectively, to competent individuals, and under very clear supervision. This law is not about creating new requirements. It's about enabling and encouraging efficient, modern, and accessible veterinary care. It's a permissive bill that's intended to encourage delegation, to authorize delegation, and throughout it uses the word may instead of shall. So let's dig a little deeper. House Bill 24-1047 formally recognizes veterinary technicians and technician specialists in statute, providing a legal framework for their responsibilities and contributions to patient care. The law clarifies how and when tasks may be delegated, basing delegation on provider qualifications and aligning supervisions with task complexity to ensure both flexibility and accountability. By allowing veterinarians to delegate appropriately based on training, experience, and statutory guidance, the law supports efficient, high-quality care across a diverse set of practice settings. It brings Colorado's veterinary statutes in line with contemporary team-based practice models, recognizing the evolving roles of veterinary professionals and the demands of modern animal care. The bill reinforces that delegation decisions must be grounded in competence and supervision, protecting patients while expanding care capacity. And we'll say that many times in this briefing. I wanted to take a look at why the definitions section matters in the Practice Act. It establishes exactly what clear terms mean. It's like a glossary. It includes terms like diagnosis, delegation, supervision, veterinary technician, or direct supervision. Without those clear definitions, the danger is that veterinarians, technicians, pet owners, regulators, and even courts might interpret the same thing differently. So that would create confusion and inconsistency. So the definition section ensures that when the Practice Act uses a term, everyone understands it in the same way. It brings clarity, consistency, and enforceability to the law. We like those things.
Yes.
The definition section now, as a result of 1047, includes 28 definitions that are all arranged alphabetically. My personal favorites are number 14, practice of veterinary medicine, and number 19, veterinary client-patient relationship. House Bill 24-1047 introduced a couple of new definitions, and it refined other definitions. So the definitions that it introduced are delegation and delegate. Those things were not in the Practice Act until this bill was passed. It refines delegations like the tiers of supervision, immediate, direct, and indirect, providing essential legal clarity to support consistent application in practice and in rulemaking. As I said a moment ago, delegate and delegation and some of these other terms were not in the Practice Act, such as supervision or supervising licensed veterinarian. So we're cutting some new territory here. The bill defines supervising licensed veterinarian, helping to delineate clinical authority, delegation eligibility, and regulatory responsibility across team members. For the first time, veterinary technician specialist is defined in statute, allowing for appropriate delegation under indirect supervision and supporting advanced credentialing pathways. So taken together, these new and updated definitions create a statutory foundation for the board to develop rules, delegate tasks appropriately, and enforce supervision standards, all of which ensure safe and effective veterinary care. So let's now turn to the exceptions section of the Practice Act. The exceptions section defines the limits of regulation. So it kind of looks at what's in the definitions and it says, yes, all those things are true, but now you got to be aware of these people or activities that are not subject to regulation under the Act in the same way. So that helps the board avoid overreach in enforcement and understand scope limitations. So how do these exceptions inform the board's role? The exceptions articulate where the Act does not apply so that the board doesn't interpret rules too broadly. This helps in complaint review to distinguish between regulated practice and exempt activity. Let's look a little closer at what 1047 did in the Exception Act. It provided 2 clarifications and adds new provisions. So the law explicitly identifies 4 protected functions that cannot be delegated or performed by non-veterinarians. These things were referenced in Section 105 exceptions previously, but they were stated in such a confusing way that it was hard to understand. So those 4 protected functions are diagnosing conditions, issuing prognoses, prescribing medications, and performing surgery. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. There's a new provision that affirms while non-veterinarians may not independently practice veterinary medicine, delegation is explicitly permitted. So this is the first time that the Practice Act has actually explicitly permitted delegation when it's conducted under appropriate supervision and within the bounds of board-adopted rules. This statutory language affirms the board's role in upholding public safety and animal welfare by maintaining clear boundaries around clinical authority. There are actually 2 new exceptions that are intended to expand access to care in shelter settings and for livestock in our state. The first is a statutory carve-out for animal shelters, and you can see it on the screen. It provides a targeted exemption allowing individuals within shelter settings who are not licensed veterinarians to deliver animal care services to animals that are the property of the shelter or under the stewardship of a shelter. It does require at least indirect supervision by a licensed veterinarian, ensuring that clinical oversight is retained even in these high volume, sometimes resource constrained environments. That supervision requirement is maintained. It also, for the first time, introduces the idea of protocol-based care delivery. So all care provided under this circumstances must follow a written or verbal protocol established by the supervising licensed veterinarian, maintaining alignment with the veterinarian's medical judgment and liability structure. The training must be determined by the veterinarian. Again, we promised you'd hear this from us a number of times. It is the supervising veterinarian's responsibility to determine that the individual has received sufficient and proper training, safeguarding care quality while allowing operational flexibility. And the last new exception is this livestock provision, which is intended to provide a statutory foundation for increasing access to care for livestock. This livestock provision allows non-veterinarians to perform tasks on livestock when supervised by a licensed veterinarian, expanding capacity in rural and production animal settings. The supervising licensed veterinarian must have an established VCPR with both the livestock and the owner, ensuring the veterinarian remains clinically and legally accountable for care. Individuals, again, may act only in accordance with a written or verbal direction from the supervising licensed veterinarian to ensure clinical consistency and compliance. And again, here and throughout the statute, the veterinarian must assess and confirm that the individual performing tasks has received adequate and appropriate training, maintaining standards of care and safety. This provision enhances practical access to veterinary services for livestock producers while preserving professional oversight and responsibility in accordance with the board's regulatory framework. We know that there are still some other things about livestock care that need to be ironed out for this. One of them is cell phone access in rural areas. This depends on that kind of access. And it also depends on developing a cadre of veterinary professionals who are well-trained in these procedures and in these tasks. So both of those things, we hope this helps to empower. So I think that's my last slide, and Erin, it's up to you.
Great, thanks, Diane. So one of the most robust aspects of 1047 is the new section 12-315-105.5, which introduces the process of delegation, which Diane told you was not outlined in statute before, and now it explicitly is, by both formally authorizing veterinarians to delegate tasks and laying the ground rules for all veterinary professionals to work within a structure of mutual accountability and understanding. Delegation must comply with both statute and board rules, so this is where the board's role in implementation becomes very crucial. The entirety of 105.5 can be looked at as a flow chart for safe and effective delegation. To start, a VCPR must be established before delegation occurs. It's the crux of veterinary care, except in very rare emergency circumstances that are already outlined in rule. Delegation applies not just to veterinary technicians and VTSs, but also to other qualified personnel, offering flexibility in how practices build their teams. I would like to note that 1047 was passed prior to the creation of the veterinary professional associate, and as such, it does not take into consideration the future role of a VPA, meaning that other qualified personnel was not meant to include that role. The rulemaking for the VPA is anticipated, I believe, to begin early 2026. So stay tuned on that.
That's my understanding too.
So the next step in delegation involves 3 key considerations for a veterinarian to evaluate before delegating tasks. The first is to consider an individual's education, training, experience, and licensing means that delegation can be judicious and individualized to ensure safe and competent care. Second, the appropriate level of supervision is determined for the specific task based on the complexity and skill level of their veterinarian team. And lastly, consider whether the task is governed by state or federal law. Some tasks have a minimum level of supervision required or are covered by federal law. So it is up to each member of the veterinary team to make sure they understand those outside laws. So to sum it up, this section reinforces the role of professional judgment while encouraging thoughtful, patient-centered delegation. Section 105.5 then moves to incorporating supervision requirements into the delegation process to help clarify when supervision levels are prescribed versus discretionary. If the task is listed in statute or rule, the veterinarian must follow the minimum required supervision level. Veterinarians have the discretion to always request a higher level of supervision than what is in the statute or rule. But if the task is not specifically covered, the veterinarian may still delegate it, but ensure appropriate supervision based on professional judgment. This strikes a balance between structure and flexibility, allowing veterinary medicine to evolve while protecting safety of those patients that we're treating. The next part of 1047 contains the task list. And the statute clearly categorizes tasks into 3 tiers, which Diane talked a little bit about in that definition section. So we have immediate, direct, and indirect. And those have been refined in 1047 to provide a transparent framework for task delegation to veterinary technicians and veterinary technician specialists based on the level of oversight required. By listing specific tasks under each supervision level, the statute helps eliminate ambiguity in practice, ensures compliance with scope of competence, and supports enforceability by the board. So this tiered model balances delegation flexibility with patient safety by matching task complexity and an individual's experience with appropriate supervision, which empowers veterinary teams while maintaining accountability under the supervising veterinarian. Because delegation represents a relationship of trust and accountability between veterinary professionals, Section 12 of 1047 statutorily requires veterinary technicians and veterinary technician specialists to only accept tasks that are within their scope of competence and under an appropriate level of supervision. This means the delegation and supervision responsibility doesn't solely fall to the veterinarian. Veterinary technicians are responsible for knowing their limits and following supervision roles to complete the circle of team accountability in patient care and create shared liability, because we know veterinary medicine really is a team sport. So another thing to take into consideration is the fact that veterinary medicine is a rapidly evolving field. So 1047 includes board requirements to help the board create and maintain the rules governing task delegation and supervision. Specifically, the statute mandates the board to consult with a broad range of stakeholders, including veterinarians, veterinary technicians, specialists, and even clients, to ensure that the new rules reflect real-world practice needs and have professional input. This is also the first of two sections that require the board to permit a veterinary technician specialist to perform any task under at least indirect supervision, reinforcing a VTS's advanced training and licensing level, and enabling expanded utilization of these team members within the team. Statute also requires the board to periodically review and update the rules to keep pace with evolving veterinary medicine and technology, promoting regulatory relevance and long-term adaptability. As with previous sections of 1047, there are some exceptions to the supervision guidelines that consider the broad spectrum of veterinary teams. The specific guidance is regarding VTSs and other personnel. This is the second place we see in statute that allows a veterinarian to delegate any task to a VTS under at least indirect supervision, provided the task aligns with the VTS's training, competency, and experience, which recognizes their advanced qualifications and supports efficient care delivery. The statute also provides the flexibility to delegate to non-credentialed individuals if those individuals are working under direct or immediate supervision and have the appropriate training and experience. The goal really is to expand workforce utility while maintaining oversight. So these following slides have a list of the tasks that licensed veterinarians may delegate that are statutorily defined in 24-1047. This list is not all-encompassing and is really meant to give veterinary professionals a reference point when considering efficient, team-based delivery of veterinary care and to allow flexibility to keep pace with evolving veterinary medicine and technology. So to reiterate, 1047 is a roadmap for effective veterinary task delegation that encourages and authorizes high-quality, efficient delegation. The definitions create a common language as a basis for delegation and supervision. From there, 1047 recognizes the crucial role of each veterinary professional and offers guidance for not only licensed veterinarian, but also veterinary technician specialists and veterinary technicians to create an environment of shared responsibility and liability. Lastly, 1047 gives the board a way to address unsafe or unauthorized practice from any team member, not just the veterinarian. We hope you found this briefing informative and useful. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please reach out with any questions.
Thanks for watching.
Have a great day.
Bye now.